Oi, tudo bem? Welcome back to Portuguese Lessons with Professor Jason. Now this is going to be Lesson 10 in the special series that I've designed to help you to jumpstart your Brazilian Portuguese. In the previous lesson, Lesson 9, I presented about 34 extremely common verbs, right? Everyday kinds of verbs that you really have to know. Verbs is vocabulary. In this lesson, I'm going to build on that by sharing another 20 verbs. Now the thing about these verbs is they're also very frequent. They have multiple meanings and uses. But the difference is a lot of these tend to have irregular forms, okay? Now, on a related note, a friend of mine that knows a lot about making videos and social media and things like that gave me a few helpful suggestions, suggesting that, for example, I cut my videos into shorter segments, I post more often, and that I make more of an effort to look into the camera, right? Now, those are great suggestions, and I plan to follow them very soon. However, this is going to be your typical Professor Jason video. A lot of information and maybe a little bit on the long side. So I ask for your patience, but I promise I'm going to make it worth it. Okay, I'm going to pack a lot of information into this video. It should be very useful. Okay, without further ado then, let's go ahead and get started. Vamos começar. Alright, so first off, we're going to start off with an overview of this lesson. Be sure to watch Lesson 9 first. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. I went over 34 verbs. Now in this lesson, we're going to focus on 20 different verbs, but the emphasis is still on their semantic, right, aspect, using verbs as vocabulary. So these 20 verbs are used very frequently, dozens of times a day. They have multiple meanings, functions, and uses. We'll go over those. They occur in many common set phrases or idiomatic expressions. And a lot of them, if almost all of them, have irregular forms which you have to memorize. Okay, so what you're going to see as we go through these 20 verbs is a sequence of slides for each, right? So for each verb, you're going to see forms in the present, the simple past, and that compound periphrastic future, that going to form. Okay, I'm going to talk about the basic meanings, common functions, and uses, and mention any related verbs. And you'll also see examples, just a few examples of those basic meanings and common functions and uses. And then for each verb, I also have a slide in which I provide a few common set phrases and idiomatic expressions. Alright, so the first verb I want to look at is ser, to be. And I'm going to use this slide sort of as an example. So you're going to see the verb, you're going to see the primary meaning, to be. You're going to see all the forms in the present, past, and compound future, that going to form. And I'm not going to dwell on the forms. You can see them and review them, but do notice, as I mentioned previously, the many irregularities that need to be memorized. You'll be able to see on the slide if there's a related verb semantically in terms of its meaning. So we have estar and ficar, which also have to do with the concept of to be, and then some common uses and functions and examples. All right, and I'll go over these quickly. So ser is used to describe persons or things. João é simpático e inteligente. So these are sort of permanent inherent characteristics of João. To indicate origin, right, where someone is from originally. Eles são de Londres. To indicate nationality. Eles são ingleses. To indicate profession. Ela é advogada. She's an attorney. To indicate something's fixed or geographic location. O estádio é no centro da cidade. And to indicate times and dates. São as 8 da manhã. Hoje é sexta-feira, for example. Okay, so as I mentioned in the overview, for each of these verbs, or for most of them, I'm also going to provide some very common set phrases or idiomatic expressions. So these are just sayings, chunks of language that have a certain semantic, right, a certain meaning. Okay. So with ser, there are many, way too many to list, and I'm going to provide some of the most common. So you can start off a phrase with eki, which means the thing is, right? Or you can end a phrase or end a sentence with não é or né, which means isn't that right or right? And sometimes the person will chime in, yeah, that's right, Someone might ask, you might be talking, someone might ask, ah, yeah, right? Oh, really? Ah, yeah, right? That can sometimes be sarcastic. Ah, yeah, depending on the situation. If you want to ask someone, hey, what happened? Que foi? Que foi? Something a little bit more formal, maybe in writing. Sendo assim, in that case, or seja o que for, whatever the issue. Seja quem for, that would be whoever it might be, whoever that might be, seja quem for. Seja como for, in any case, in any event, and that form for is the future subjunctive for those grammar geeks at home. And then there's also an expression not quite as common, but só se for, and then an adjective or a modifier, right? So for example, só se for barato, only if it's very cheap, right? And then sometimes people will tack on só se for after somebody describes someone or something to imply doubt or skepticism. All right, the second verb in today's lesson is estar. Estar, which means to be. So it's related semantically to ser, has similar meanings, but it doesn't have interchangeable functions, right? So we're going to use estar to describe conditions or states, right? For example, nós estamos cansados. We're tired right now. Você está com sede? Are you thirsty right now? No, eu estou com fome. I'm hungry because estou sem comer desde ontem. Estou sem comer desde ontem. Eles estão na dúvida. They're experiencing doubts or concerns right now. So those are four different, if you look at those closely, right? Four different constructions. Some using prepositions, some using nouns, others using verbs to express a state or condition with the verb estar. You also use estar to indicate location, something or somebody's temporary location. So it goes with the question, onde está? Where's something or someone at? A Carolina está na biblioteca. She is at the library, right? Onde está o livro? Where's that book, right? Or to indicate an ongoing action. This is actually a verb tense. You use a form of the verb estar, conjugated, plus the progressive of the main verb. So if I want to say that my child is sleeping, my son is sleeping right now, meu filho está dormindo. So on this slide, you can see some set phrases or idiomatic expressions involving the verb estar. Okay, and again, these aren't going to be every expression or every set phrase, just some of the more common ones that you might need to use in your first month in Brazil, for example. So you can use está to indicate weather conditions. For example, está calor, it's hot, or está muito frio, it's very cold. There's an expression, está na hora de, and then to add a verb phrase, right? It's about time that we do something. Está na hora de, whatever, right? There's an expression, estou de olho em você. Estou de olho em você. I've got my eye on you, right? Estou de olho em você. And then there's one that's maybe a little bit rude, but if you want to express the sentiment you couldn't care less, it's não estou nem aí. Não estou nem aí. All right, verb number 3 is haver. Haver, right? Which means roughly to be, to exist, there is, there are. It's similar, almost exactly in use and function to the Spanish verb haber, right? And so, like in Spanish, we really only use the third person singular forms of haver in Portuguese, right? So, há, havia, houve, or haverá, right, in the future. Now, you might use some of the other forms if you're using a compound form in the past. Okay, and I've got an example of that on this slide. So, we use haver to express existence, the idea that there is or there are. So, for example, if I want to say there are 20 students in that class, há 20 alunos, notice again, singular, há 20 alunos nessa sala, right? The form is singular of haver. I can use haver to indicate time since something. So the expression is há, and then the number of years. Eu moro aqui há 3 anos. Eu moro aqui há 3 anos, right? Or I can use, and this isn't super common, it's more common to use the related verb ter in this compound tense, but to indicate that something had happened or that somebody had done something. Eles haviam estudado muito, right? I could also say, and you'll see this, eles tinham estudado muito. So as you can see, haver is not used in a ton of set phrases, but there are a few that are common. You can ask, hey, what's going on? O que é que há aqui, right? O que é que há, right? What's happening? Or, o que é que há com você? O que é que há com você? What's your problem? What's the matter, right? What's the matter? What's your problem? You might want to ask, whatever happened to so-and-so, right? O que houve com, that's the past tense, o que houve com whatever person. And then there's the expression haja o que houver, right? Haja o que houver, kind of subjunctive forms, and that's like saying whatever happens or come what may. Moving on then to verb number 4, ter, right? Ter, which means to have. It could also mean to be as you look at the functions and uses at the bottom of the slide. And so of course it's related to the previous verb, haver, when it's used as an auxiliary verb, haver and ter, okay? You can see the forms here in the present, past, and future. Now, some common functions and uses of this verb to express possession. Of course, I have this, you have that. O meu pai tem dois carros, my father has 2 cars. To express the idea of there is and there are, just like há 20 alunos, I can also say tem 20 alunos nessa sala. And here we also use the singular, third person singular, tem 20 alunos, or há 20 alunos. To indicate a condition, right? Ela tem muito medo, so you can look up a list of expressions with ter, right? Ela tem muito medo. Eu tenho fome, right? Estou com fome. To indicate age in years, so just like in Spanish, right? Usted tiene 18 años. Você tem 18 anos. Você tem. Eu tenho. To express an obligation, using the form ter que, right? Tenho que trabalhar amanhã. I have to work tomorrow. To indicate that someone has been doing something, right? Not has done, but has been doing. Ele tem treinado demais. He's been practicing too much, right? He has been practicing. Or to indicate that someone had done something, right? Nós tínhamos assistido esse filme. So we had already seen that film. As you can see here, ter is used in a fair amount of very common idiomatic or set phrases, right? One is to express what you'd really like to do. Ter vontade de. Eu tenho vontade de ir à praia, right? I'd really like to go to the beach. If you want to ask, are you sure? Are you certain? Tem certeza? Tem certeza? The person might say, tenho certeza. To express, you're right. Você tem razão. Tem razão. Just like in Spanish, right? Tiene razón. To say, be careful. Tenha cuidado, right? Tenha cuidado com isso. Be careful with that. That's not very funny. That's not fun. Isso não tem graça. Isso não tem graça. That's no fun. Or to say that has nothing to do with anything. Isso não tem nada a ver. Não tem nada a ver. Verb number 5 is fazer. Fazer. Super common verb used all the time, right? Every day, often, means to do or to make. It's used in a lot of expressions. You can see the forms here. Eu faço, and then the irregular forms in the past tense, right? Some common uses or functions, of course, to say or to ask what someone does, what they're doing, what they did. So just to talk about actions, right? Ela faz sobremesas deliciosas. She makes. Ela faz. She makes delicious desserts. Você já fez, ask someone what they did in the past. Você já fez a tarefa? Did you already do the assignment, the task, the homework? Eu já fiz, right? I did it. Já fiz. To ask what someone does, for example, for a living, this is a formulaic question. O que você faz? O que você faz da vida, if you want to be more explicit. Or to ask or report on how long someone has or hasn't done something. Pay close attention. This is similar to the Spanish expression, hace cuánto tiempo, right? Faz quanto tempo que você, and then whatever, right? Faz quanto tempo que você não liga? How long has it been since you haven't done this? Faz quanto tempo que você não liga para sua mãe? It's been 2 months, right? Faz, even if the thing that comes after is plural, it's still faz. Faz 2 meses que não ligo. And as far as idiomatic expressions or set phrases with fazer, there are several, and this is just a small sampling. One very common one is faz sentido. That makes sense. Faz sentido. So if somebody's explaining something, you might say, faz sentido, right? If you want to say that it doesn't matter or you don't care, tanto faz, right? Somebody asks you what you want to do and you really don't have an opinion, tanto faz, right? You can ask, would you do me a favor? Me faz favor? Você me faz favor? Right? Or let's pretend that the expression is faz de conta que, Faz de conta que. There's an expression, fazer as pazes, right? To make up, to reconcile with somebody. Somebody got in a fight, and now they're going to fazer as pazes, right? Fazer questão is an interesting expression and also a super common expression. And it means to insist. So you might hear it in the question form. Você faz questão de... And that means with a verb phrase after it. So for example, você faz questão de visitar a sua mãe, right? So that would mean, is that activity something you absolutely or that you insist on doing? And if you do, you would say, faço sim, eu faço questão de, and then the phrase. This is a very common expression with fazer questão, to insist on doing something. Another really common verb is verb number 6, ir, to go, ir, right? You can see the forms there, the irregular forms in the past, the irregular form in the first person in the present, eu vou, eu fui, você foi in the past. Some common uses or functions or meanings here at the bottom of the slide. Obviously to indicate where someone's going, right? Miguel vai à praia. O Miguel vai à praia. He's going to the beach. Ele vai. To indicate a future action, right? A future action. A Caroline vai ligar amanhã. She's going to. So that's the future tense I've been using throughout this presentation. Vai plus the unconjugated form. She's going to call. A Caroline vai ligar amanhã, right? To indicate the mode of travel, here you use a preposition usually. Vamos de carro, vamos a pé, right? To say, let's do something. Vamos dançar. So using the first person plural, we, plus the verb, right? Vamos dançar. Let's dance. To indicate leaving, eles querem ir embora, or elas, I should say. Elas querem ir embora. That phrase, ir embora, means to leave. Or to say, let's go. Vamos, or vamos embora. And moving on to set phrases or idiomatic expressions with ir, right? Here we have vai saber, which means who knows, or really like, hell if I know, right? Vai saber. Vamos lá means let's go do it, let's get started, right? Vamos lá. Vamos nessa is similar, it means let's go. Vamos nessa, right? Let's do that thing, right? So somebody suggests something, you might say, vamos nessa, right? Sometimes they'll drop the last S sound, vamos lá, or vamos nessa. Let's do that, let's get going. If you want to tell someone to get lost, you could say, vá pastar, right? Or even stronger, like go to hell, right? There's a couple of expressions, vá pro inferno, right? Or even vá a merda, right? Which is a little bit stronger. Of course, querer, right? To want, querer, is an extremely common verb in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. It's related in terms of its meaning to desejar. Many times you can substitute desejar for querer. You see the forms here. I'll call your attention to the irregular forms in the past tense, eu quis, right? Você quis. Now let's look at some of the common uses, functions, and meanings at the bottom of the slide. Obviously we use querer in its straightforward sense to indicate want or desire. For example, meu irmão quer carro novo, right? He wants a new car, right? Just to say what somebody wants. To ask or to say what somebody wants to do, so just by adding a verb. O que você quer fazer, right? Eu quero assistir o jogo na TV. To indicate a wish, oftentimes using the imperfect, right? Queria, which I don't have listed as one of the forms. Queria, right? So I might say, my son wishes he could drive. Meu filho queria dirigir agora. Wishes he could drive already, right? And then there's more of a specialized, this last use on here, using the verb querer in the sense of eu quero você, right? That direct quero você has sort of a sexual connotation, right? I want you intimately. Quero você. Oddly enough, now I couldn't think of a ton of set phrases or common set phrases or idiomatic expressions, because in this lesson my emphasis really is on the ones you'll hear all the time using querer. So one that is fairly common is the expression se você quiser, right? Se você quiser, sometimes it's meant literally and sometimes it's meant sarcastically or ironically, right? Se você quiser. If you want, we can, right? Se você quiser, right? Or if somebody asks, do you want to do such and such a thing? You might say, se você quiser, if you really want to, right? The expression or the form querer dizer means to mean, as in what does something mean? This means that. And I'll come back to this when we talk about the verb dizer. So look for it there. Finally, there is a proverb or an expression, right? Querer é poder, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. Querer é poder. Speaking of poder, right? It's our next verb, verb number 8. Poder means to be able to, right? Poder. To can do something or to can't do something, right? It's related semantically to the verb conseguir, which means to obtain or to be able to. We'll see that a little bit less later in today's lesson. Look at the irregular form in the first person, eu posso in the present, and then all the irregulars in the past tense, right? Pude, pode, okay? Pudemos, puderam, okay? And excuse my pronunciation, I'm not Brazilian, and so I don't pronounce perfectly, right? Don't be too critical. But anyways, moving on to some common uses and examples of functions. It's pretty straightforward. You use poder to indicate someone's ability to do something. Vocês podem me ajudar? Can you help me? Are you able to help me? Vocês podem me ajudar? Right? Podemos, sim. Yes, we can. To indicate permission, someone has permission or authorization to do something. Ela não pode sair hoje. Ela não pode sair hoje. She can't. She's not allowed to. And in the conditional tense, which I don't have all the forms on the slide, but poder is used to make polite requests. So just remember the form poderia, right? Você poderia me trazer mais água, por favor? You might ask the waiter. Could you please bring me some more water? Você poderia me trazer mais água, por favor? In racking my brain, I was really only able to come up with a couple of fairly common set phrases or idiomatic expressions with poder, or using poder. One is super common, right? Pode ser, right? Pode ser, maybe or perhaps. So if somebody says, can you do this for me later today? You might say, pode ser, probably, maybe, right? Or you can say perhaps something, something, right? Pode ser que, right? There's another one to express sort of incredulity, right? That you can't believe something. And it goes with a specific intonation that I might not get quite right, but it's more or less, como é que pode, right? Como é que pode? How's that even possible? That's unbelievable. This usually has a negative connotation, or it might be used to express sort of amazement, right? Wow, como é que pode? Como é que pode? Okay, verb number 9 is dar. Dar, to give, right? Dar. It's pretty straightforward. You can see the forms here, the irregular forms in the past, for example. Remember, all the verbs in this lesson, many of them have irregular forms. You really need to go back, review the slides, and memorize. Dar is some of the uses and functions to indicate giving something to somebody. Eu vou te dar meu endereço. I'm going to give you my address. Or meu pai me deu 100 reais. Right, my father gave me 100 reais. To indicate handing something to somebody, right? Você pode me dar esse livro aí? Can you hand me? Can you give me that book? Or there's a specialized use of dar in the reflexive, which means to get along with, right? Se dá bem. Elas se dão muito bem. They get along very well. So in addition to those straightforward kinds of uses, the verb dar is used in lots of set phrases or idiomatic expressions that are quite common, actually. You can use dá para either to ask or to say that something's possible. So you just add a verb on there, right? Dá para, right? Dá para falar com seu chefe? Would it be possible to? Dá para falar com ele? Would it be possible? Não dá, that's not possible. Não dá, you can add again a verb phrase after that. Não dá. Me dá minuto, right? Give me just a second, give me a minute. Me dá minuto, or me dá minutinho. Very common. Me dá minuto, right? Dar certo, dar errado are ways of saying that either something went well, really worked out well, or went badly, went wrong, or didn't go well, right? You can say everything's going to work out fine. Tudo vai dar certo. Vai dar tudo certo, right? Or I might be getting that slightly off, but dar certo means to go well. To not to lead to anything or to not lead to anything is não dar em nada. Não dar em nada. And if you want to say, let's take a break, usually from our relationship, vamos dar tempo, right? Nós vamos dar tempo. As you can see from this very busy slide, verb number 10, deixar, deixar, has a lot of primary meanings, a lot of functions and uses, okay? Luckily though, the forms of the verb deixar are regular, as you can see. Now, deixar means to leave, to quit, to let, or to allow, and so it's related to the verbs permitir, right, to permit, to allow, and parar, to stop or to quit doing something. Let's look at some common functions, uses, and meanings, right? We're going to use deixar to express that somebody left or is leaving something somewhere. A Júlia deixou sua filha na escola. Deixou sua filha. She left her daughter at school. She dropped her off, right? To indicate leaving or forgetting something somewhere. Poxa, eu deixei as minhas chaves em casa. Deixei as chaves em casa. I left my keys at home. To indicate where you put something, right? Or that somebody should put something somewhere. Deixe as sacolas na cozinha, por favor. Just leave those shopping bags in the kitchen. Deixe as sacolas na cozinha. To indicate that somebody is going to leave or abandon or has left or abandoned someone else. Ela deixou seu marido. She left her husband. Deixou, right? Ela vai deixar seu marido, right? So to leave someone, to abandon someone. Just like in English, to leave, right? To indicate quitting, right? Quit doing something or quit a job. O Jorge deixou seu emprego. He quit his job. He left his job. Or my mother quit smoking. Minha mãe deixou de fumar. And to indicate allowing something, right? Meus pais não me deixam dirigir, or not allowing. They don't let me drive. One way that deixar is used idiomatically is to say deixar and then an adjective, right? So to say that somebody makes me or drives me a particular way, right? Ela me deixa louco. She drives me crazy, right? I can express exasperation. Poxa, ela me deixa louco, right? She drives me crazy. So deixar plus an adjective. A very, very common expression is deixe para lá, deixe para lá, deixa para lá, right? Just forget about it. Let's drop it. So if somebody's talking about something, you're either done talking about it or you don't want to talk about it anymore. Deixe para lá, right? Let's drop it. Pode deixar is a very, very common expression in Brazilian Portuguese also. It means don't worry. So if somebody asks you to do something, right? Be sure to do this for me. I need you to do this and this other thing. Pode deixar. Don't worry. Pode deixar. I'll handle it. I'll take care of it. Don't give it another thought, right? Another common sort of duo of expressions is você deixa, right? Can I do that? Would you allow me? Will you let me? Eu deixo. Go ahead. Yeah, you have my permission. Você deixa. Eu deixo. All right, guys, we've passed the halfway threshold in this lesson. Verb number 11, dizer. Very common verb in Brazilian Portuguese, means to say or to tell. So it's related to falar, to speak, to talk, and also contar, which means to tell, right? You can see the irregular first person present form, eu digo, and the irregular past forms as well. Let's look at some of the common uses, meanings, functions down here at the bottom of the slide. Obviously, we use dizer to indicate telling, right? Vou te dizer a verdade. Vou te dizer a verdade. I'm going to tell you the truth. To tell someone what to say, me diga, right? That expression. Me diga o que você quer, right? To report what someone said, right? In the past tense. A Ana me disse, ou a Ana disse que ligaria mais tarde, right? She said she would. Ela disse que, right? What someone said they would do. Or to indicate what someone told someone else to do. O Leandro disse para você telefonar. He said for you to call, right? Disse. O Leandro disse para você telefonar. So take a look at those last two uses and maybe a closer look at the grammar use, those structures. And in terms of idiomatic expressions or set phrases with the verb dizer, there are several very common ones. If you want to express, tell me, what do you think, right? You would say, me diz, or more formally, me diga, right? Tell me, me diz, right? If you want to express sometimes sarcastically, you don't say, right? Não me diga, não me diga. So it can be sincere, you can express surprise, or it can be a little bit ironic or sarcastic, right? Oh, no kidding, right? No me diga. They say that, like they say it's going to rain. Dizem que, so that sort of nebulous they, right, that do things and say things. Dizem que, right? They say it's easy. Dizem que é fácil, right? They say it's going to rain. Dizem que vai chover, right? Quer dizer means in other words. So someone might be saying something and then they pause and they say, quer dizer que, right? Or quer dizer, what I really mean is sort of to clarify. So you might hear that expression, quer dizer, right? What I mean is, or in other words, right? Ou seja, there's a set phrase that you would use to ask what something means. O que quer dizer? So if you hear an expression or a word you don't know, right? You can ask, o que quer dizer tal coisa, right? Or if you want to know how something is said, right? Como é que se diz, right? So if I want to say, how do you say telephone in Portuguese? Como é que se diz telephone in Português, right? And then there's a proverb or an expression, right? A set phrase, o tempo dirá, time will tell. O tempo dirá. All right, it should be obvious just from looking at this slide that verb number 12, ficar, is extremely important and common in Brazilian Portuguese. I think it's right up there with ser, and it shares something semantically in terms of meaning with the verb ser. It means to be, to become, to remain. Okay? Sometimes it's used interchangeably with ser, as we'll see in a second. So, good thing about ficar is that it has regular forms across the board, right? Let's take a look at some common uses or meanings of the verb ficar on the bottom half of the slide. We use ficar to talk about staying or remaining at a location. Por exemplo, eu não quero ficar neste hotel. I don't want to stay, remain in this hotel. Não quero ficar neste hotel. Or to indicate or ask about permanent location. Okay? Remember we had the example a few slides back with ser. O estádio é no centro da cidade. Well, you could say, o estádio fica no centro da cidade também. Or, esse hotel fica na beira da praia, right? Or, onde fica, to ask about location. Onde fica teu apartamento? Where is your apartment? Onde é or onde fica? You can use ficar to indicate how something fits or looks on a person. Esse vestido fica ótimo, fica bem em você. It really fits, it looks great on you. To indicate how someone reacts, right? Emotionally, right? Eu fiquei com muita raiva. I got very upset. Fiquei com plus emotion, right? Or fiquei feliz. To tell someone what to do or what to feel, right? We'll see this expression on the next slide, but fique tranquilo, right? Be calm. Fique quieto, right? Don't say anything. Shh, fique quieto. To indicate repeated or ongoing action, so the verb ficar, conjugated, plus the progressive tense or progressive form of the verb. Meu PC fica desligando toda hora. Fica, right? Plus the ando or endo form. And to indicate an assumed obligation. Ficar de. Use the form ficar de. Meu vizinho ficou de, usually in the past tense, ficou de alimentar meu gato, right? He said he would, right, feed my cat. On this slide, I have three very common set phrases or idiomatic expressions with ficar. And in each case, I provided the informal, the to form, fica, which is common, and also the você, fique, right, fique form, which is also common. They're both common, depending a little bit on what region of Brazil you're in and how common the imperative in the to form is, okay? So, fique à vontade, very common expression, means make yourself at home, make yourself comfortable, go ahead, be my guest, right? So you might walk into someone's home literally, and they might say, fique à vontade, right? Point to the sofa or something like that. Or you might be looking at a spread of food, and they might say, fique à vontade, right? Go ahead, be my guest. Fica or fique bem is sort of a farewell. Many times, fique bem means take care, fique bem. Fica or fique tranquilo, right? Or tranquila, relax, right? Don't worry, fique tranquilo. So these are very common expressions with ficar. All right, moving on to verb number 13, gostar, to like, gostar. Now this verb's meaning is related to adorar and amar, right? Means to really like doing something or to really like a particular thing. And its use is fairly straightforward. So we're going to use, notice the forms are regular as well. We're going to use gostar to indicate what someone likes or dislikes, right? Aline gosta de chocolate. Gosta de. Notice I've highlighted in white the preposition de, right? Or a Michele não gosta de carne. Não gosta de carne, right? So what someone likes or dislikes. In terms of, here we have nouns, right? You can also use verbs to indicate what someone likes or dislikes doing. O João gosta de ler. Ele gosta de ler. O Marcos não gosta de estudar. Não gosta de estudar. Okay? So we have gostar, the conjugated form, and then de, and then unconjugated verb, de ler, de estudar. You can also use the form gostaria, to ask what or to say what someone would like to do hypothetically. Você gostaria de morar no Rio de Janeiro? Você gostaria de morar lá? Would you like to? Now there may be some idiomatic or set expressions that use the verb gostar idiomatically, but I couldn't think of any, right? So as a verb, gostar isn't used in too many of these. It's almost always used in its primary literal sense, to like or enjoy. Just remember to use the preposition de, unless gostar is the last or only word. So I'll give some examples of usage here, right? Você gosta de sorvete? Do you like ice cream? Você gosta de sorvete? Right? Você gosta de escutar música? Gosto sim. Or, você gosta de escutar música? Não, eu não gosto. Quero assistir De Volta para o Futuro 2, Back to the Future 2. Você gosta? Eu gosto. Alright, moving on to verb number 14, por, to put or to place. Now take a close look at the forms here in the present, past, and future. You can see that por involves some irregular forms, some diacritic marks or accents, and so it's kind of a minefield. This verb por even gives, in terms of the forms, especially in writing, gives native speakers some challenges. It's related to colocar, which also means, we'll get to it in a second I think, or it might have been in the previous lesson, which also means to put or to place. So meaning, uses, and functions are pretty straightforward, right? We're going to use por to indicate putting or placing something somewhere. Eu vou pôr seu casaco no closet. I'm going to put your jacket in the closet. Or, eles puseram a louça na pia. They put their dishes in the sink. Or, por could be used to tell someone where to put something, right? Põe o frango no forno, command form. Ponha o frango no forno, right? Put the chicken in the oven. Ponha. Or to indicate putting on something, right? Putting on clothing. A Bruna pôs a blusa cinza. Or eu pus os tênis que comprei ontem. She put on, right? She put on the gray blouse or gray shirt. And I put on the tennis shoes that I bought yesterday. Here are three fairly common, right? Idiomatic expressions with the verb por, to put. One is por a prova, right? Which is to put something to the test, right? Por a prova. Por ponto final, right? Which means to end permanently. So you remember earlier on we had, what do we have? Vamos dar tempo, right? We're going to take a break. Well, if that doesn't work out, then you're left with por ponto final, right? A gente deu tempo e agora vamos por ponto final. We're going to end it, to end something permanently, terminally. And then, of course, put yourself in my place, or put yourself in his, her, or their place. Ponha-se no meu lugar, or ponha-se no seu lugar. Another really common verb in Brazilian Portuguese is precisar, to need to, precisar, right? So you can need something or you can need to do something. You see the forms here on the slide. They are regular. Of course, it's related semantically to the verb necessitar, right? Some common functions or meanings to indicate what someone needs, right? O aluno precisa de, right? Again, the preposition de, right? O aluno precisa de livro de texto. He needs a textbook. Nós precisamos de mais dinheiro. We need more money. Or to indicate what someone needs to do, right? So here we have prestar or precisar plus a verb, right? O aluno precisa prestar atenção. Needs to pay attention. Você precisa descansar. Do you need to rest, right? Preciso sim. Yes, I do need to rest. One really super duper common idiomatic usage of precisar would be the expression no precisa, right? No, you don't need to do that. That's not really necessary, right? It's another way of saying thank you, right? So if somebody does something to you, or not to you, but for you, right? Someone does something nice for you, someone brings you a gift or something like that, you can say, no precisa, no precisa. It's not really necessary. Or no precisava in the past tense. No, you really didn't need to do that, right? And colloquially, a lot of people will use the form estou precisando de, right? When they need to do something, instead of just saying preciso dormir, they might say estou precisando dormir, right? Or I need what? I'm just thinking randomly. I need a pillow, right? Estou precisando de, right? Estou precisando de travesseiro. Ou estou precisando de mais dinheiro. On to verb number 16. Ver, which means to see, to look at, to watch. Okay, it's related to olhar and assistir, which also mean to look at and to watch. Look at the forms, right? A lot of irregularities, right? A lot of vowels switching and moving around. And compare this slide, right? Verb 16, ver, which with the slide that comes 2 slides later for the verb vir, in terms of vir, which means to come. In terms of the form, it's very easy to confuse the forms of ver and vir, as you'll see in a minute. All right, so some common uses, functions, and meanings for the verb ver to indicate what or whom someone sees or is looking at, right? Você vê aquela estrela? Can you see that star? Are you seeing that star? Or remember the film The Sixth Sense, right? The little boy says, I see dead people. Eu vejo gente morta. Eu vejo gente morta. To indicate what or whom someone sees or is looking at. To indicate looking at, right? I like to look at pictures, old pictures. Eu gosto de ver fotos antigas. Or to indicate watching TV, watching a game, right? O Alex quer ver o jogo. O Alex quer ver o jogo. Or meus pais gostam de ver filmes. Alright, the verb ver is used in several set phrases and idiomatic expressions. One of the most common is just to add on to the end of a sentence or after a sentence. View, right? See. It can also be used in the sense of told you so, right? View, right? If you're watching something together and it confirms something that you had told someone earlier, you might look at them and say, view. Another common expression with ver is tô vendo, tô vendo. It's a little bit hard to explain and contextualize, but it means, I see, tô vendo. Deixa eu ver means let me see, just like in English, right? Let me see when you're thinking about something. Deixa eu ver, right? Like, let me see if I understood. Deixa eu ver se eu entendi direito, right? Or, let's see, we'll see. Vamos ver, vamos ver. So, let's see if, vamos ver se, and then we get out a verb phrase, right? To have nothing to do with is não ter nada a ver, right? So no, that has nothing to do with anything. Isso não tem nada a ver com nada, right? Or she has nothing to do with that. Ela não tem nada a ver com isso, right? A transition expression, which means in my opinion or according to my perspective. A meu ver, more common to see in writing perhaps. And then sometimes people will make an expression and then sort of tack on the phrase que só vendo, right? Que só vendo, which means you'd have to be there or see it to believe it, right? Like I might say, oh, Rio has some amazing beaches. You just have to see them to believe them, right? O Rio de Janeiro tem umas praias muito lindas, que só vendo. Okay, guys, I promise we're in the home stretch now. Verb number 17, vir, to come. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, you might want to compare the forms of the present past, right, with the forms of the verb ver, so you can try to keep them separated in your mind. It's very challenging for people learning Portuguese to keep separate the forms of ver, to see, and vir, to come. You have irregularities in both charts, if you will. So I'll leave that up to you. It means to come, and so it's related semantically to ir, to go, and chegar, to arrive. It would be used commonly, right? Some of its functions are to indicate that someone is coming, right? To a place, to an event, or like to a party, or over to our house. Quem vem à festa? Who's coming to the party? Eles vêm para nossa casa hoje. They're coming over to our house today. You could use vir to invite someone to come somewhere using the sort of the imperative forms, right? The subjunctive venha or vem, right? Venha para o Brasil, right? Vem para o Brasil. Come to Brazil, right? To invite someone to do something, again using the same forms, either venha plus verb or vem plus verb. Venha assistir o filme comigo. Come watch the movie with me. Venha assistir o filme comigo. Come and do this thing, right? Or to indicate that something has been going on. So we're going to use the form vem and then a progressive form. O prefeito vem prometendo isso há tempo. Has been promising, right? The mayor has been promising. We could use tem also. Tem prometido ou vem prometendo isso há tempo. I couldn't think of a lot of idiomatic or set phrase usage with the verb vir, right, to come. But of course, it's used a lot when you want to say something like next week, next month, next year. You would say a semana que vem, or o mês que vem, o ano que vem, right? Also, there's the command, hey, get over here, come over here. Vem cá, ou vem para cá. Okay, verb number 18 is saber, which means to know how to do, or in the past, to find out. Notice some of the irregular forms, right? The irregular first person form in the present, eu sei, and then the past tense forms are all irregular. Soube, soube, soubemos, souberam. Okay? It's related, of course, to the verb conhecer, which means to know in the sense of to be familiar with something. We'll see that it's the next verb in the lesson. But the uses are not interchangeable. Its functions are not interchangeable with saber. So pay attention. So some of the common uses, meanings, and functions of saber. Clearly to indicate knowledge or awareness of something. Somebody tells you something and you already knew that. You could say, eu sei, or I don't know, não sei. To ask if someone knew something, você sabia, você não sabia, right? To indicate what someone knows, so adding a noun. Nós sabemos a resposta, we know the answer. Or to indicate what someone knows how to do. Now here's a true story. O André sabe desenhar, right? He knows how to draw. O André sabe desenhar. To indicate that somebody found something out, or when they found it out. Quando você soube os resultados? When did you learn of, in the sense of to find out the results? Or to indicate memorization. Saber de cor. Saber de cor, that's the phrase. A Mari sabe essa música de cor. She has that song memorized. Okay, one of the very first expressions I learned in Brazilian Portuguese, set idiomatic expressions, was this first one here, and it's one of my favorites, right? You'll hear it all the time. Somebody asks a question, and the person responds, sei lá, right? Sei lá. It's related to vai saber. So it basically means, who knows, right? I have no idea. Sei lá, right? So, what is João going to do tomorrow? Sei lá. Who knows? How should I know, right? I have no idea. Sei lá. Você que sabe means it's up to you. Você que sabe. If somebody asks, would you rather do this or that? You might respond, você que sabe. You decide, right? It's up to you. Sabe de uma coisa means, you know what? So it could be the preface to you're about to tell someone something. Sabe de uma coisa? You know what? Que eu saiba means as far as I know, right? And then finally, sei, right? Sei is usually said with a touch of irony, right? Sei. So when you don't really believe someone, somebody tells you a story. Hey, where were you last night? Oh, I couldn't call you because I was busy. And then the person says, ah, sei, right? Yeah, right, sei. Okay, so as I was mentioning, this verb, conhecer, verb number 19, is similar to saber, previous verb, in that it also means to know. Another meaning of conhecer is to meet or to visit a place. So it's related to saber and also to visitar. Look at the forms. You can see that they're basically regular. The first person form in the present, first person singular, eu conheço, is spelled with a C cedilha, but it's basically a regular form. Okay. Now let's look at some of the common functions of the verb conhecer, and maybe these will help to tease them apart from those of saber. All right. So we use conhecer to indicate knowing a person, to know someone. Eu conheço sua tia. I know your aunt. Eu conheço sua tia. To indicate being familiar with a place, right? Você conhece Copacabana? Are you familiar with it? Do you know your way around? Você conhece Copacabana? Conheço sim. To indicate having visited a place, right? So for example, in the past tense, have you been to Itália? Vocês já conheceram a Itália? So you can see that that might be the same as asking, have you ever been to or have you visited Italy, right? Or ele quer conhecer os Estados Unidos. He wants to visit. He wants to go to the United States, right? So if you find yourself wanting to ask someone, have you ever been? Já conheceu, right? Já conheceu, whatever the place is. To indicate meeting someone, right? Past tense. Nós conhecemos dois brasileiros ontem, right? Or I met your mother. Eu conheci a sua mãe. Eu conheci a sua mãe ontem. Or to indicate that two people know each other using sort of the reciprocal, right? A reflexive use. Elas se conhecem há muito tempo. They have known each other for a long time. Okay, I wasn't able to think of or find many common set phrases or idiomatic expressions that use conhecer, but I did find this one, and I have heard it a couple times, and it's kind of funny. When you want to tell someone, I'm not really buying what you're selling, right? Especially from you, because I've got your number, right? In Portuguese, you can say, quem não te conhece, que te compre, right? Quem não te conhece, que te compre. Okay, and finally, verb number 20, right? Conseguir, which means to obtain, in which sense it's very similar to obter, and also can be used to mean to be able to do something, where it's similar to poder, right? So I've been emphasizing these sort of semantic relationships, and the whole sort of overarching principle of this series in lessons 9 and 10 is verbs as vocabulary, not knowing simply how to form the verbs, and that's why I've not emphasized forms. They're on the slides, but what they mean and how they're used, their common meanings and functions, right? So now you know, between the two lessons, 54 verbs as vocabulary. I want you to know what they mean, how to use them. So back to conseguir, right? Conseguir is used to indicate getting or obtaining something. For example, eu preciso conseguir esse livro. I need to obtain that book. I need to get that book. Or ela conseguiu emprego. She got a job. Conseguiu emprego, right? She got a job. It can also be used in the sense of that someone was able to or managed to do something, usually in the past. Eu consegui convencer meu chefe. I was able to convince my boss. Or nós conseguimos comprar o carro. We were able to buy the car. Or that someone was able to make someone else do something. O professor conseguiu que o aluno aprendesse. Here we have some imperfect or past subjunctive going on. And I was able to come up with 2, 3, 4 possible uses of conseguir as set phrases or idiomatic expressions. One very common one is to say, vou conseguir, right? Something's very difficult, some task that I need to do. It's really hard, mas eu vou conseguir. I'm gonna accomplish it, right? There may be something that you want to ask someone if they were able to do. Você conseguiu, right? Were you able to do it? consegui. Yes, I was. I was able to do it. I got it done. Consegui. Right? Conseguiu, consegui. And then finally, remember a few minutes back, several minutes now, I presented como é que pode, right? How is it possible that somebody does something? A similar one using conseguir is como consegue, right? And sometimes by adding an expression, for example, if I wanted to talk about a politician, how is it possible that that person is so ignorant, right? Como consegue ser tão ignorante? How is it possible, right? So those are expressions using conseguir that you might hear. Alright, well that's it for Lesson 10 in my Jumpstart Brazilian Portuguese series. I apologize if it was a little bit on the long side, but I hope that you've taken away a lot of really useful information. Now if so, I'd ask that you share this video lesson with other learners and let me know if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions. Be sure to catch the next video lesson in this series and don't forget to look for me on all of your favorite social media platforms. I'm just about everywhere. Thanks again very much for watching and be sure to visit the Professor Jason channel again really soon. Até breve. Tchau.
Pra sair no Oslo, bloco as flor da terra.